Thank you, Lord. I think anybody can follow up on that is hymn number 33, To God Be the Glory. Hymn number 33. Let's all stand, please.
This is for old time's sake.
Shelter or called me a few weeks ago and told me about this anniversary celebration at Gila Valley Baptist Church. He asked me if it invited me to come and be in this service, and I'll be honest with you, part of it was an excuse to get back over this part of New Mexico. We've been gone so long, been down in Florida where there's just mosquitoes and swamps and alligators and big pine trees, little pine trees, big palmettos, little palmettos. We're just glad to get back here where the mountains where you can see for 100 miles or more. I really don't know why I'm here talking to you about any part I had in Gila Valley Baptist Church. If anyone should be speaking First Church Lordsburg, it should be Brother Joe Rouse and Brother Harold Bishop, as they've been the faithful ones in that church through these years. Robert has covered so well the background on the church and the relationship between the First Baptist Church Lordsburg and the Gila Valley Baptist Church. I could not but look at your sheet there of all the preachers who have been here. And the Baptist world is a rather small world when you get right down to it. I looked down that list and saw a group of the boys who were Wings for Christ boys that I knew at Grand Canyon College. And I know where some of them are serving now throughout the Southern Baptist Convention. Elwood Lodge is Minister of Education in the Jacksonville Baptist Association in Jacksonville, Florida. Jim Richards was in the Wings for Christ group, and he's not in this, I guess he didn't preach here, but he preached in other places around over Arizona, New Mexico, and he's Director of Missions for Jacksonville Association. And I just looked down through the list and saw man after man that I knew in places they've served. Brother Hutchison spoke of Henry Blackaby, and he was one of our pastors in Canada. We encouraged him to let the Lord lead him back to Canada from California. He went to Saskatoon and there started 9 missions from his church. And one time his church had 16 young people in Southern Baptist Seminary preparing for ministry in the churches in Canada. The Baptist world is a small world because we're all involved in our mission programs and doing what God would have us do. First Baptist Church Lordsburg is one of those churches that has served the Lord through the years in a place that is not the easiest of places to serve. Faithful members of that church have witnessed in the community and have borne witness for Christ and ministered in His name in that place. As I was thinking about Gila Valley Baptist Church and First Baptist Church at Lordsburg, I realized that these two churches could be classified as median churches in the Southern Baptist Convention. Brother Dr. Cohn, it doesn't matter too much what state you're in or what convention you're in. The median church is always just about the same size. In Florida, we had some churches that had 10, 15, 16, 18,000 members. But the median church was just about the size of this church. The median church was just about the size of the Lordsburg church. Half of them were larger than that, half of them were smaller than that. But I always think of the median church as being the church where most action takes place in the kingdom of God. A church like this one, and a church like First Baptist Lordsburg, ministers to the needs of individuals and of families. People are won to faith in Jesus Christ. The Clark family were reached in the Lordsburg church. I think sometimes we as preachers have the opportunity to speak. We're good at that. I was late getting in line for lunch. Someone said, why aren't you in line? Why aren't you in the front of the line? There's only one thing I'd rather do than eat, and that's to talk. And preachers that way, and usually we get to make the speeches about what all the church has done. And yet we have not really been the ones who did that hard, difficult work. I'd like to digress just a minute this afternoon. Joe and Elsie Rouse. Elsie had an accident, is recovering, couldn't be with us today. Joe is a rancher, lives 17 miles south of Lordsburg. Not a service of the church. He and Elsie are not there for those services. For nearly 40 years, he served as Sunday school superintendent director now. And he told me today that he's finally turned it over to someone else. And he's serving as associate Sunday school director. Elsie's worked with children through the years. Been faithful, stalwart members of that church. Harold and Ruth Bishop are here today. Harold has a building materials, hardware, and appliance business in Lordsburg and has served in nearly every capacity in the church except Sunday school director and WB president, I guess. And Ruth has served in Sunday school, taught, been involved in music in the church, playing piano. I think of these two families, along with the Clark family, as filling unique needs in the life of that church and in the life of this church. God always has some people who are going to stay by the stuff. Who are going to be there through thick and thin, in the ups and downs, and the good times and bad. And you know you can count on them, God knows He can count on them. And I believe that Joe and Elsie and Harold and Ruth and Robert and Evelyn have been those people. Robert and Evelyn, shortly after they trusted the Lord, became interested in mission work. And Robert began the work out of Red Rock and carried that work on until he knew he was going to come back up here, and then he got Arnold Nard ready to take it over so he could get loose from it. But God has blessed Lordsburg Church. He's blessed this church. Lordsburg Church authorized this mission to be started. He extended an arm, prayed for it, undergirded it in many ways. But it's largely been done by those of you who are here, and begun certainly by Robert and his family. God's plan is for churches to be involved in missions. God does not want any to perish, but that all come to redemption. The pastor did it so well this morning. She spoke to us so well this morning on what our task is as followers of Jesus Christ. We're to be starting new churches. Now, there are not an abundant number of places where you could start new work in this area. I've served the last 10 years in Florida, and we moved in population of about 9 million to nearly 13 million in population of that state in that 10-year period. We moved from the 19th state in population to the 4th state in population in less than 30 years. And with tens of thousands of people, there are places everywhere to start missions. But there's ministry and mission to fulfill where you are here. There are ways in which people can be reached for Christ up and down this area of New Mexico. And this church is not the only church that God has in this world, but this is the church that God has given a particular and unique mission to reach people for Jesus Christ. I think God expects you, as followers of Jesus Christ, to be faithful in your witness day by day and in your mission expansion. There just may be places where you need to reach out and have a Bible study, or places where you need to have a vacation Bible school this summer for some children, maybe just 10 or 12. But some lives can be touched so that at another time, 30 years down the road, I'll see a little boy singing in church like I saw a little fellow sitting right over here singing this morning. Every song, every word of song. Because people need to be won to faith in Jesus Christ. Appreciate so much what your director of mission said about our cooperative work together. I guess there's one thing that I've always been conscious of about the Lordsburg Church is that they were involved in the work of our denomination. I was talking to a pastor Wednesday evening, and he told me that he and Harold had been to a stewardship conference, getting some training in stewardship. And I appreciate churches that are willing to be involved in learning how to do more for God in His work. Each church is important. There's not a church that God has established that isn't critical of the kingdom of God. I was talking to a pastor one day in Florida, and I said, "How's your church doing?" He said, "We're not doing too good." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we're not reaching many people." I said, "How many went and baptized last year?" He said, "We just won about 19. And I said, "Well, how many members do you have?" He said, "We have 200. And I said, "Well, you're doing better than I named a church that's known throughout the denomination for its baptismal record." I said, "You actually more effective last year, more efficient as a church than that church with thousands of members. Because you had a baptismal ratio of 1 to 10. It only took 10 people in that church to win one person to Christ. And that large church, it took about 17 people. to win one to faith in Jesus Christ. Mission is the same. A church this size, of this strength, is just as important in the kingdom of God in your part of the mission program, Southern Baptist, as the church that gives hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's right. That's right.
Because most of them are like yours. And God expects all of us to be faithful. I'm so very grateful to see what God has done in these 30 years in this church. As Robert and I talked earlier today, we could never have dreamed that this would happen. And it could not, apart from the power of God. Dr. Coleman, I still can't remember getting that $1,000. I do want to express appreciation to you today for what you as a church have done and are doing. I think Robert said it right. The church needs to be recognized. The persons who make up this church week by week and Sunday by Sunday and day by day in your testimony of faith in this community, your witness for Jesus Christ and your ministry in His name. To God be the glory.
Amen.
I don't believe we have any former pastors with us this morning, do we? This afternoon, that is. Are there any present pastors here? I have Brother David Goebels with us, and his lovely mother, Mary Ellen, or Helen, that is. David calls her the Reverend Mother. David, would you mind if I borrowed a little bit from the Gospel of Walt for just about a minute? Seems like there was a young man by the name of David who was walking on the backside of the hill down from his dwelling place one day. And in David's hand was a match. David struck the match, touched it to the bush. The bush caught fire, and lo and behold, the whole hillside was on fire. And David findeth out that the Lord wasn't in the flame. The fact is, David didn't even take his shoes off, for the ground in which he stood was hot. Well, the moral of the story is, if you have a bush and you see David coming, he has a match. Don't let him near your bush. There he was, good David.
I have one memory of the old building that I'd like to share. I was thinking back that we probably had the only church in the world probably that had youth sitting on the front pew instead of on the back, because there were two lizards that enjoyed sitting on the back wall. So I remember Shannon McBride and I would sit up front because we didn't want to sit back there with those lizards on the back wall.
There's a place dear to me where I'm longing to be with my friends at the old country church. There with Mother we went, and our Sundays were spent with my friends at the old country church. Precious years of memories. Oh, what joy they bring to me. How I long once more to be with my friends at the old country church. As a small country boy, how my heart beat with joy when I knelt in the old country church. And the Savior above, by His wonderful love, saved my soul in that old country church. Precious years of memories, sweet memories. Oh, what joy they bring to me. How I long once more to be with my friends at the old country church. Oft my thoughts make me weep, for so many now sleep in their graves near the sometime I may rest with the friends I love best in a grave near the old country church. Precious years of memories, sweet memories. Oh, what joy they bring to me. They bring to me. How I long once more to be with my friends at the old country church.
I tell you, this has been a good day. It's been a good day. I'm so glad I got invited. One thing that thrills me in going throughout New Mexico, and for 5 years I've had the privilege, there are antelopes between Vaughn and Roswell that I stop and visit with frequently. We know each other, and there are some prairie dogs in some other places, but the thing that thrills me about the Baptist work of New Mexico is nearly anywhere you go, you will find a witness for Christ through the Baptist faith. I've been here 5 years, and I've preached in 171 of the 269 churches. And I'll go some other places that folks will just invite me. You have to be invited to go. And so there's some places I'd like to go. If I ever get invited, Dan, I'm going to go to some of those places. There might be some reasons I'm not invited. I need to check on that too. But I think of places like Shiprock and Des Moines and Springer and Loco Hills and Plias and Gila. Places that are not known around the world. But when you get there, there's a Baptist church and a Baptist faith and a witness for Jesus through Baptist people. I'm thankful for that. That thrills me. That blesses me to know that some lay people like Robert and his family through the years have just said, we're going to have a church where we live. First church I pastored down south of Lubbock, my great-grandmother started the church. She rode in a horse and a buggy throughout the community and got enough folks together to come in the schoolhouse and to start the church. And she had a famous saying. I preached her funeral when she was 93 years old. Her saying was, I'm not raising chickens for the coyotes, nor kids for the devil. That was her continual theme song. And so she got together and got a church where she lived. I just want to thank you for the privilege of being in your church again. My wife and I were here. I don't know how long ago it's been. I lose track of time. But we had a marvelous weekend. Family life emphasis in this church. So it's just a treat to come again today. My son flew me down here. An hour and 18 minutes. I promise you that beats driving from Albuquerque to Silver City. And since I was in Carlsbad Friday night and drove down there Friday afternoon and back yesterday to Albuquerque, I'm thankful for the privilege of having him fly me here today. Craig, I want you to stand up and let these people see what a handsome, fine-looking young man he is. Looks just like his daddy. Exactly like his daddy, but I'm glad he is a pilot by profession. He flies all the time, and so it's not a treat for him so much to get to fly, but I'm grateful he thinks it's a treat to get to fly me, because it's a treat to get to fly to some of these long-distance places. Now, we're supposed to be through before, and we're going to beat that by about 10 minutes. I'm going to see to it that at 10 minutes to 4, we're through. If I'm not, why don't you just leave? Get up and walk out and go on. And I'll go ahead and finish whatever I've got to say, but that's long enough to be here. 10 minutes to 4, we need to be through, and I'll bet you that we can do that. It is a small world in many ways. The man that led Robert to the Lord, Brother Guy Petty at Lordsburg, is the man that I walked down the aisle in Las Cruces in August of 1954 and gave him my hand, and I said, Brother Petty, the Lord is calling me to ministry. He was my pastor, and I was trying to make a civil engineer over at New Mexico. It was A&M in those days, and we'd gotten to calculus, and I was starting to look at the ministry and a few other things. I think it's time. So I was grateful for the opportunity that the Lord gave me a way out. to go into ministry. And I'll always be grateful for Brother Petty being my pastor and the influence he had upon my life. Dan Stringer is, I'll tell you what, he's the father of all executive directors. I couldn't believe when I looked in that program and saw he was going to be here today. And he is a great inspiration to many of us. Came in so green and not knowing how to do things. He's been a tremendous help to a lot of young men coming into executive director. And our church that night burned for 4 hours. And my son was 13 years old, and we stood catacornered across the street, wrapped up in blankets because it was cold. Man, it was cold. And a reporter from the Pampa Daily News walked up, and folks, this is the truth. Craig said to me one day, said, "Dad, are you preaching or are you telling the truth?" Well, right now, I'm telling the truth. This is not just preaching. This is telling the truth. And this reporter walked up and said, "Are you Reverend Cone?" That's always a sign. Be on your guard. They call you Reverend. I said, "Yeah, I guess I am." He said, "This is pretty bad fire, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it really is." And what all have you lost? And I thought, well, my soul, man, you're not blind. Take a look at it. The auditorium's gone. The stained glass windows have melted out and fallen out on the sidewalk. I said, it's all gone, I guess, except the 2 educational buildings. I believe we've saved those. And he said, well, what have you lost personally? And I said, well, my study's on the 3rd floor and the roof has fallen in. He said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, it means all of my books are gone, my college notes, my seminary notes, and all of my sermons. And this is the truth. Craig was standing there. He said, oh boy, no more reruns. Well, I tell you what, Dan, only a preacher's kid can appreciate that. He really, and that really happened. He was right. No more reruns. After that, I had to go back and put them together. Well, son, this is not a rerun today. This is for today, and you haven't heard this before, I don't think. Let's look at Matthew 22, verse 34. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. Now, they didn't ever get together, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but boy, they were both against Jesus. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. Someone said that love is what makes the world go round. Well, love is what keeps the church sound. If you've got a church in love with God and in love with each other, that church is in good shape. And I think if there's anything that you ought to applaud God for today is the fact that He just loves us. If there's anything you ought to applaud each other for is you love each other. I've found a sweet, warm fellowship. The times that I've been in this church and the testimony that I've heard from this church across the state has always been the same, that it's a church that gets along. There's a harmony in this church. The Bible says that God is love. But Jesus said that we ought to love the God who loves us. And John says we ought to love God because He has first loved us. And if the priority is anywhere, I think Jesus spelled it out. When they said, now, of all the commandments, I guess thinking particularly of the 10 commandments, which is the greatest? It was a trick question. But He wasn't tricked. He said, well, the first one's this. Love God with your total being, with your complete personality, heart, soul, strength, and mind. Everything that makes you a person, love God intensely with all of that. And by the way, if you love God like that, you'll keep the first 4 commandments. You won't have any problem not having any other gods before you or any graven images. Remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy and not taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain. If you love God with your whole being, you'll keep the first 4 commandments. And Jesus said the second one is just sort of a twin brother to the first one. Love your neighbor like you love yourself. And if you do that, you'll keep the next 6 of the 10 commandments, which are the horizontal commandments. Honor your father and your mother, and don't lie, and don't steal, and don't kill, and don't bear false witness. If you love your neighbor like you love yourself, you won't do those things against your neighbors. So Jesus said, you want to know where the priority is? Here it is. I can just give it to you in one breath. Love God and love others. Those are the 2 points of this message. That's real profound. But that's what I want to share with you very briefly. If I could give you any word as a church, you've come through 30 years and only God knows when Jesus is going to come. But until He does come, and as long as you've got a breath, let every part of you love God. Love God. Folks, love is a choice. You decide whether you're going to love God or not love God, whether you're going to love others or not love others. As a pastor, I used to have someone every once in a while come wandering into my office. I remember one lady made her mad at a hornet. One Wednesday night, she caught me after prayer meeting, set me down on the front row, and she said, I'm going to divorce my husband. Well, her husband had just come to Jesus. I just baptized him. And I said, why? And she said, well, I don't love him anymore. You know what I told her? I said, oh, I understand. You've made a choice, and you don't love him anymore. You have decided and chosen not to love him anymore. She said, what do you mean? I said, I mean just what I said. Love is a choice. You choose, you decide whether you're going to love or not love. And dear people, we need every morning before our feet ever hits the floor for our first choice to be, God, this day I'm going to love you with every ounce of being that I am. I'm going to love you. Let me tell you 3 areas in which we ought to love God with our whole being. I think we ought to love God for creation, for just making us. Now, I don't know, maybe your life hadn't been too good a life. Maybe you've got a face as long as a saxophone and you feel like a crab apple put up in dill pickle juice. That might be the way you feel, but I want you to know my life's just been pretty good, pretty good. And I've had a few downs and a few bumps and some disappointments. My mother died when I was 23 days old. I was her first and her only child, and that was disappointment. My father was killed when I was 14, and that was a disappointment. And the church burned in 1973, and that was a disappointment. And I've had a few disappointments, but all in all, my life has been abundant. Out of my life has flowed rivers of living water. Many of you know my wife. My, what a jewel she is. And 2 precious kids. I love my kids. I'm proud of my kids. And all in all, my life's just been real good. I want to thank God. I want to love God today for making me in His image. By the way, while I'm thinking about that, I'm glad He made us male and female. I like that, too. I like 33 years of the gal I'm married to, and I like family. I just think, God, I'm so glad that He said Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. I really am. I am thankful that He's made us in His image, made us male and female, and made us for Himself. I like the world that He's made. Flying down here this morning, I had a chance to look at a whole lot of it and come over some pretty rough country. In fact, we're in a single-engine plane. Old Craig said to me, he said, Dad, you know, I hope everything goes well. There's not much place to put this thing down right here where we are. And I said, no, I don't believe there is either. But it's a beautiful world. God's created a wonderful world. He's created the Sabbath for our good, for worship, and for rest. I look at God's creative powers and His wisdom, and I just say, God, I love you for making me and making this world and letting me be a part of it. I think we ought to love God for salvation. Not just creation, but salvation. We all fumbled and stumbled and blew it and missed it. We're all sinners by nature and by choice. And there's none righteous, no, not one. There's no redemption for fallen angels. But just as soon as Adam and Eve fumbled, God said to Satan, He said, oh yes, I know what you've done in deceiving these people, but I want you to know from the seed of the woman, it's going to come forth the one, it'll bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. He's talking about our salvation. He's talking about the cross, about Jesus paying the price and the penalty for our sin. By fact, the Bible says even before the foundation of the world, God had a Savior. He had a Redeemer for us. Before there's ever a hill on which to put a cross, ever a tree out of which to make it. God already had it. It cleanses us from all sin. The Bible says so great salvation. The Bible says God's unspeakable gift. I'm so grateful that God, in His love, has given us a plan of salvation and a way of redemption. And folks, we ought to love Him for that. We ought to love Him for that. Our next stop after this life in Jesus, friends, is going to be heaven. Heaven. We ought to love God for creation. We ought to love God for salvation. Let me tell you a third thing. We ought to love God for congregation. I remember the church as long as I remember anything. My grandmother reared me by applied psychology. She had a board in one hand and a Bible in the other. She applied both of them where they ought to be applied. You know, one of them on the north side when you're southbound, about 6 inches below the waistline. She applied that board. And that Bible she applied to my mind and my soul and my heart. And my precious grandmother didn't know the King's English, but she knew the King. She knew the King. And all I can ever remember is going to church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, vacation Bible school, RAs, revival, go to church. But I'm grateful for the church. I've never been out of the church in my whole life, not one time. You know what I mean, a series of time, a period of time, junior high, high school, went off to college, 4 of my best friends. 5 of us got together, all belonged to Grandview Baptist Church. We were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I needed all the help with calculus I could get, so I went to church every time I had an opportunity, trying to get all the outside help I could find. Oh, the church! It's got its warts, and it's got its pimples, and yeah, there are even a few hypocrites in the church. Every once in a while, folks talk about, oh, hypocrites church. Yeah, there are a few down there, but my soul, where do you expect them to be? They're going to be in the bar. They're going to be in the pool hall. And take your hat off to them for one thing, they're trying to mock the best. They really are. You know, they don't make counterfeit $4 bills or counterfeit $9 bills. They make counterfeit $10 bills and $20 bills. You know why? Because the real things are worth something. That's right. They make glass-shaped diamonds because the real things are worth something. Now, I just want to thank God. I want to love God for His body, for His bride, for the church. Brother Dan said it well, friend. It doesn't have to be 5,000 or 10,000 members. I tell you, some of the greatest experiences in all of life are in the little churches. The little churches. First church I ever pastored, the first Sunday morning, we had 28 in Sunday school. 28. Love that church. I love the church. I love God for the church. Don't ever take light your church. It's blood bought. By the way, when Jesus comes, He's not coming for the Lions Club or the ladies of the Over the Hill Violets Club. He's coming for the church. The church. Love God. Love God. Second thing I want to say, and I've got 4 minutes to say it, but I can do it. Love others. Love others. You know where the priority is? Love God and love others. There are 2 others we need to love. First of all, we need to love our brothers. We need to love the saved. I was reading 1 John again this morning coming down here, just thinking about what John said. He said, you know, the real proof that we love God is that we love one another. If a man says that he loves God and hates his brother, he's a liar and the truth's not in him. And we need to always be sure we love those of the family, those of the church. And some of them are easier to love than others are. I know that. Some of them you have to strain yourself a little bit sometimes to love them. But I just challenge you to love the family, love each other in the church. One of the poorest witnesses in the world are church fusses and church fights. The outside lost world sits and they say, we don't need that. And they talk about God's forgiveness and God's love, and they take on down there, you know, like a bunch of mad dogs. What a tragic witness that is. I just encourage you to flame the fire of love in the church for one another. For one another. There's a church in New Mexico today, a building that's still there, that the church doesn't meet anymore. I asked a DOM one day, director of missions, one of those Radford Hutchison type folks, and I said, what happened to that church? This DOM told me, said, one woman killed it. her domineering, bickering, nitpicking ways killed it. And I just kind of let that register. I was in that town one day, and the pastor of the First Baptist Church of the town, I said, the church that used to be out on the other end of town, I said, what happened to that church? And he didn't know what the DOM had told me, and he said, one woman killed it. Killed it. I was later on with another DOM who had worked among the Indians in that area, and I just thought, well, I think I'll see what he says. Asked him the same question. I asked him about the church. And what happened to that church? He gave me exactly, precisely, syllable by syllable, the same answer the other two people had gotten. From 3 different people, I got the same answer. One woman killed that church. Don't you let anybody kill your church. Don't you let anybody throw water on the love that there needs to be permeating the membership of the church. You love one another. Love